Welcome, everybody, to Survive and Advance on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for Survive and Advance, Mike Goodpaster. And, of course, my co-host, or I'm a co-host and he's a co-host because he'll get mad if I call myself the host and him the co-host. A 1981 national champion. Bobby Knight said he was probably the greatest player to ever play at IU. Help me welcome to the show, Steve Risley.
How you doing, Mike? You know, I was sitting here thinking of a story. I was watching the golfers. They're playing at Muirfield Village, which is Jack's course. And then they are also playing up in Lake Tahoe, the Celebrity Pro-Am big tournament. Where Barkley comes and makes a fool of himself and everything every year. And I remember an old story about Bob Knight. We were playing in the IU basketball players tournament one year, and I was entertaining a group of players, and Knight comes flying up on his golf cart as I'm getting ready to hit a 5-wood. I got to go about 215 yards with a 5-wood to reach a par 5 and 2. And, he comes in, kind of one of these starts smarting off to me as I'm lining up my shot and getting ready to hit it. I hit the dadgum ball, and I've never hit a 5-wood any better. I stuck it about 3 feet from the pin. And then he starts smarting off. I said, if I'd have got this kind of coaching when I was playing at IU, I might have been as good as Larry Bird. He had some derogatory comments to make and drove away.
All right. I won't make any derogatory comments.
Oh, go ahead. No problem.
No, I mean, it was that game against Notre Dame. You were really good.
Was I?
Yeah, 1977. Remember, we posted it on the Grueling Truth Facebook page.
Oh, yeah. But did you know what my career high was?
Probably that game.
No. I had 26 points against Bradley at Market Square Arena.
Bradley,
the Bradley Braves. Oh, we got to change that name.
I remember it. Yeah, we'll have to change that name. But the Atlanta Braves aren't going to change their name. But let's get to the bigger issue today, which is college football. The season is in peril. And the idea of playing college sports has seemed kind of iffy all along. And now the Ivy League shut down earlier this week, shut down all sports until at least January the 1st. Ohio State and North Carolina each had enough positive coronavirus cases among the few athletes on campus that they suspended summer workouts. And the Big Ten soberly announced that most of its fall sports, including football, would play only league games if they played at all. The Pac-12 on Friday announced the exact same thing. So, Steve, is just kind of just holding off the inevitable that there's not going to be a college football season in the fall?
Well, Mike, I think they need to make a decision on this right now. I think it's ludicrous to go on and play, especially college sports where there's a lot more spirit and things involved in the game than just the actual playing in a bubble as the NBA is trying to do. College football is about the experience of going to campus, a lot of people coming back, visiting campus, tailgating a lot. There is so much interaction among fans and things like that I think the wiser decision right now would be just to say we have no control or grasp over this. You're causing financial drain. I mean, they're talking about potential loss of $160 million per team for the non-conference schedule. Now, and you're talking about teams that come in and play Michigan or Ohio State or the big powerhouse schools, Alabama, and they get their butts creamed. But that's the best payday they have all year long. We know that when I played at Indiana, teams would come in and we'd beat them 105-42, but they played in front of 18,000 people on TV at Assembly Hall, and they walked away with a huge check. Those checks are going to dry up right now. And that potentially, because football generally is the revenue-based sport for most all college athletic programs, especially at the Power 5 conference or the higher level, D1, and that's going away. Now you're just going to have conference games, but you got to split 10 ways, and you keep all that in-house, or however many teams are in your league. It used to be the Big Ten, but now it's the big 27 and a half. But that money now is all just distributed back to the teams in the conference. So the outlier teams are going to get crushed here right now. I suggest, and let's have this discussion, before we even get into Notre Dame, what it's doing to them, they do the right thing and just say, we're not equipped to play right now. Go ahead.
Well, I think the issue with that is the economic impact it'll have on all these schools, because I think the fact of the matter is that for most college athletic departments to survive as we know them, there needs to be a football season played at some point in the 2021 academic year. And that doesn't mean it has to be played on time. It just has to be played. I mean, to me, that means maybe you start in January, you finish up in late April or early May if you had to. And no offense to the other sports, but football is the only college sport that needs to be played this next school year. If it doesn't get played, like you said, it affects all these schools. If you're Eastern Washington, this is just an example. I don't even know if they play, but they're going to play Washington State. Maybe they're getting $250,000 or $500,000 to do that. All of a sudden, that's gone. That helps fund all these other programs. And we saw Stanford the other day cut out 11 programs that have won 20 national championships. Close to me, the University of Cincinnati got rid of men's soccer, which I think everybody should get rid of anyways. But the point is, this is going to affect a lot of other sports. It's not just affecting football. What do you think about playing in the spring?
Oh, I think it's the only viable solution. And you went back to it. I was researching this, and University of New Mexico State University was scheduled to play UCLA. Their athletic department came out and said they stand to lose $2.7 million. New Mexico State does, by not playing that game against UCLA. That basically probably is their operating budget for their athletic department. I'm talking about secretaries, staff, trainers, things like that. That $2.7 million, that's gone out the door if UCLA doesn't honor and pay the money, because UCLA is the one who canceled the game. But I think it's ludicrous for any sport to try and start up right now and think you're going to get through an entire season. I mean, baseball is sitting on an eggshell. The NBA has got its bubble, but we'll see how long that lasts. And all sports like that. But yeah, I think the thing to do would be wait till something like the end of the Super Bowl. And we still have a football hangover at that point in time, do we not?
If there is a Super Bowl, if there is a Super Bowl, if there is an NFL season,
right, can they go? Yeah, but I think it's really ludicrous to expect you're going, and the devastation it's going to cause to anything that's not a Power 5 team who's in one of the Power 5 conferences. I think it's ridiculous to go ahead and try and start the season on Labor Day or in September, which they're pushing it back to right now. How many great games are you losing by eliminating the non-conference games?
Well, it's not how many great games you're losing, it's how many paydays you're eliminating for a lot of smaller schools that need those paydays to run their athletic programs. Right. And I think the big problem with spring brings up multiple questions, such as when would the NFL draft be held if you're playing that late? If the NFL doesn't want to push back their calendar, then perhaps we'll have college football players that are going to be seniors this year choosing not to play so they can go to the combine, be in the draft, and you get younger players playing. But I think with colleges, I don't think it matters. They just need to play. And right now, if you play in September and Ohio State's playing Indiana, how many people are going to be allowed at the game? And it still affects, if the game's in Columbus or Bloomington, it affects how much money that economy at that school brings into that city. And right. That money is being lost also. And you look at a place like Oregon. I mean, the Oregon Ducks are currently scheduled to have one of their most stacked home schedules in recent memory. They host Ohio State, Washington, Stanford, USC, Arizona State. And that's a lot of money lost for that community. I think the only way to save it is if you do it that way. And I think you would have to start maybe practices in December, play the season in January, you're over by early April, and then maybe you will not collide with the NFL. Maybe the NFL will make a one-time exception, push their draft back to maybe the end of May, which I don't see why that would hurt anything. And, I mean, I just think that in the end here, if there's no college football played by the time you get to the NFL draft, I think there's going to be serious issues. And not that it would be a bad thing that the NCAA would be overthrown, but everything's going to be a lot different a year from now if there's no college football played as opposed to what it is right now, not just in college football, but the overall college landscape.
I agree. I agree entirely. And I'm going to start off by saying, first off, I don't think the NCAA needs to get any permission from the NFL when they play their schedule, when they play their season. If the NFL's got to adapt, then they've got to adapt. I think the NCAA is maybe one of the biggest sporting institutions that could conceivably have a fight with the NFL. I don't think they can win it.
I don't think they could have a fight with them, Steve.
Well, but I think that the NCAA should not bring forbearance in and say that we have to see what the NFL wants us to do. If that's what they're doing, then we might as well start paying athletes.
No, because
we're just saying we're a feeder system for the NFL.
But if the NFL draft doesn't change and the combine doesn't change, you're going to have a lot of kids that decide not to play that change it. They don't have to. The NFL doesn't have to do anything the NFL doesn't want to do it. We see that all the time. The only way the NFL is going to do the right thing is if a lot of pressure is put on them.
Well, then the NFL should just subsidize NCAA football and say, you're a feeder system for us. That's what you are right now. And we're going to pay.
They are a feeder system, and the NFL doesn't have to pay a dime for it. So the NFL is not all of a sudden going to help that out.
Right, because the NCAA is always kowtowed to the NFL. And they've always set their stuff up to make sure they steer clear of the NFL, what the NFL wants to do. Times are changing right now. The landscape is just flat out changing, and I believe it'll go back to normal at some point in time, maybe in your lifetime, maybe not in mine, but I think it'll go back to normal. But right now, we're just in extreme times, and I hate to see the devastation it's going to cause on the smaller schools that relied on these big paydays to keep their athletic programs going. They knew they were going to get their butts beat at Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson, or you can name a litany of great schools where they go in knowing they're going to get drilled, but they also know they're going to deposit a huge check on Monday when it's said and done, and that's going to cover their football, their equipment, stuff that isn't donated free from schools. That's all going to be gone this year entirely. And, you may see some football programs, some smaller programs dry up. Maybe that's what the NCAA wants, so they can throw more weight behind this Power 5 conference concept, which I think the NCAA really wants anyway. They just want the Power 5 viable, and they're going to be able to control them, charge more money to get those games. I mean, they're giving up the Notre Dame, Wisconsin game at Lambeau. I mean, that was probably going to be one of the biggest preseason games.
Huge game for Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's a huge game, and it's at Lambeau. I mean, Notre Dame's involved. I mean, that's going to be a highly watched, highly advertising, sales-wise game to watch. Right now, according to the rules laid down by the Big Ten, that game's on the outs.
Yeah.
But now how many, like the ACC is talking, and we can get into Notre Dame and what they're doing because they don't belong to a conference, so they technically don't have a schedule right now. But the ACC, I think, has not come out and said they're going to live by those rules yet, have they? I think they're indicating.
My guess is this: everybody's going to have to, though, because everybody that's in the ACC, there's got to be some teams there that are supposed to play some Pac-12 or Big Ten teams. I would think that, since, as you said before off air, Notre Dame's got like 5 or 6 games already scheduled in the ACC.
Yeah.
I imagine the ACC will let them fill that schedule because
they were talking about Boston College, Miami, and Florida State that are not on Notre Dame's schedule right now, that they could possibly bring those 3 games in, and that would give Notre Dame 9 games with the ACC. Now, we talked about this off camera too. Does the ACC come and say, hey, we got your basketball team, we got your fencing, we got your soccer team, we got your volleyball teams. We want Notre Dame football to join the ACC now too.
No, because I believe this. I believe that the ACC needs Notre Dame more than Notre Dame needs the ACC.
Oh, I agree entirely. Yeah.
And I think with that being said, that'll go that way. Now, my thing about why they won't play this year is the big thing that stands out to me. There's so many hurdles already in the way. I don't see how they can be all cleared. I mean, they're talking about testing every team before every game. And I know I coach high school football in Ohio, and they've talked about doing this in Ohio where you test everybody before every game, but there's a big challenge there, and the biggest challenge is false negatives. And I just talked to one of my friends who's a doctor in Ohio right before we got on here, and he said that'll blow up Ohio high school football right there because, testing people without symptoms will lead to false alarms because the PCR testing, from what he said, is like 40% accurate. So if you test 30 people, chances are you're going to have 2 or 3 people that don't even have it are going to test positive. And then you've got the false negatives, which signal there's no infection in those who are indeed infected. And the way he told me it was this: COVID-19 testing is typically performed on samples from behind the nose or in the back of the mouth and will be positive only if the sample happens to contain the virus. In some people, the virus may be present in high quantities only deep in the lungs. So false negatives will occur surprisingly often. Perhaps he said maybe it's 33% of the time you get a false negative because it's in the lungs, it's not where they're testing it, which leads to a false sense of security, among other things. So I think even testing, I think the more you test, the worse this gets because it gives a lot of people a false sense of security. And on the other case, it's just the testing, the PCR testing is everything I've seen anywhere from 35 to 45% accurate, and that leaves a lot of room for error.
Yeah, it just happened to Jimmy Johnson, a 7-time NASCAR champion. He had a streak going of over 650 straight starts of not missing one. He's an incredible athlete, runs marathons routinely. He's in great shape. And he tested positive on a test, like exact you said, tested positive, had to miss the Brickyard 400, which is one of the most prestigious races on the NASCAR circuit, went home. Subsequently, he never had any symptoms. He said, we never had any symptoms. Went home and had 2 negative tests, and he's driving today in Kentucky. They cleared him after less than a week. They cleared him to run. So there's no guarantee that how they're measuring it. There's no standardized testing. Everybody's doing it differently. I just think until you get some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Inoculation. What's the word I'm looking for?
Vaccine.
Until you get
have a vaccine. There's never been a vaccine for coronavirus, any kind of coronavirus.
But we've never worked on it to this level of degree that we're working on it now, too.
I think they have with the flu.
And I guarantee I'm going to rile you up right now. I guarantee you if Pfizer's involved, they'll get it fixed.
Yeah. Well, Pfizer's never been able to fix anything else except for killing people.
Oh, you're killing me. I spent 24 years fixing things with that company.
You didn't fix anything with Pfizer because Pfizer is the biggest problem with this country is Big Pharma. The reason this exists is because of Big Pharma. You can't tell me that this is not a man-made disease. It's not a man-made virus. If it's a man-made virus, who makes the most money? Yeah. Big Pharma. And the thing is this, there is a cure for it. And that's why the death rate has went down a lot, but they stopped the cure. There's a doctor in Texas, Dr. Bartlett, who's used steroids, had great effect with it. And I know that the doctor I talked to earlier today has treated a bunch of patients with the same steroids, and they get healthy and they get better extremely quick. You've also had, I think it was prednisone, which people have had a lot, and the hydrochloroquine, whatever the hell it is that Trump talked about all the time. And I know if you actually look at that, there's been a lot of success with that. So the death rate is down just because they can cure it. But the problem is if there's a cure, then you don't need a vaccine. And I think what everybody wants here that is in our government is a vaccine. You get $4 billion.
Keep selling a vaccine, correct. Yeah,
and you get $4 billion in lobbyists from Big Pharma every year giving money to senator and congressmen. They own us.
I lobbied on the Hill. I know what you're talking about. I did it.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the football. I wish we had a call-in sequence or something to get some opinion from other people on this, but I think it's really a stretch at best to think that they're going to be able to get a college football season in under normal time frames this year without loss of players, without some schools just breaking out with the corona CV-19 or whatever. I think it's ridiculous to do it. I don't think we're ready for it. I don't think it'll be adhered to at college level yet. I think kids are going to do all the partying they want to do. And Wisconsin's a party city. Madison's a party city. And
how many D1 schools aren't party schools?
Aren't party cities, right? Touche, well played. So I think it's just ridiculous to go ahead and try and play it. I think you're hurting financially too many programs that rely on these non-conference games for revenue generation, and I think it's going to be not as fun to watch.
Yeah, it's not, especially if there's no crowd. I mean, even with NASCAR, even though they don't have that many people in the stands normally anyways.
No, I agree.
I mean, it's not as good to watch. I mean, I watched the UFC fights last night. I didn't pay for them. I illegally streamed them. I'm going to admit to that. But I watched it. The fights were terrible. There's no crowd. It makes the sport less attractive to watch. And with the NFL and with Major League Baseball, I think all these in the end, they are desperately trying to hold on to make whatever money they can. But in the end, I just think the obstacles here at this point in time are too big. Now, you look at the National Junior College Athletic Association today announced that they're going to play in the spring. My son plays junior college football, and they canceled his season a week ago. This affects a lot of people, and unfortunately, none of us really know what's going on here. I mean, you hear one thing. I mean, a few months ago, remember, you weren't supposed to wear it. Don't buy a mask. It won't help you. Now, a few months later, well, everybody's got to wear a mask. So you don't know what to believe because the people in charge don't know what to tell you because they don't know what the truth is. Everybody wants to fight and bitch and give their opinions. I mean, I can tell you this. I'm not an epidemiologist, whatever you call it, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's safe. Go ahead and play. But the sad thing in all of this is the fact that we found out that even if you're a Democrat and you want to bitch about Donald Trump, your side don't have any answers, just like Trump's side doesn't have any answers.
Nobody's got any answers, and that's the scary part. And I agree with you. I think that the thing here is the only fair thing to do is just to shut all of it down and give everybody a fair chance. I think that these conference commissioners right now, the ADs, all don't. It seems to me, and I can't speak for them, but it seems to me that they're acting like there's nothing wrong. We just go about we'll put a Band-Aid on it and eliminate our non-conference schedule. But we think if we just do what is the difference between doing a non-conference and then just turning out and doing a conference schedule? How is that?
My question is this: when you talk about it and you look at the schools, like say Indiana, they're not. I don't think they're this year, but say they're playing Western Kentucky. So instead, if you go to a conference schedule, maybe you have to add Rutgers. What the hell's farther away? Rutgers or Western Kentucky? I mean, If you look at the MAC schools, which are what Ohio State beats up on, Purdue tries to beat up on them, but loses to them half the time. But when you look at it, I mean, there's not too many of these. Outside of the Oregon game for Ohio State, there's only a handful of games where geographically it's really that big of a difference. And those are programs that could actually take the loss on the money for the COVID testing or whatever they have to do.
Right.
But when you look at it, I think it's just an excuse. And if you're Ohio State and you're Michigan, if you just had 3 conference games, what are you going to do? You're just going to make more money. You don't have to pay the MAC school $250,000 or $500,000 to come play you at Ohio Stadium in front of basically nobody because the crowd's not going to be allowed.
Right.
So you might as well just make it a conference game and not have to give up the extra $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000.
Yeah, he brought up a good point too. You talk about if say somebody gives up Western Kentucky, but they have to go play Rutgers. Say it's Indiana. Rutgers is closer to New York City, which is more infested with the virus than
I believe. But it was, yeah.
It was, yeah. But it's still the population there. The interaction opportunities would be much greater than they would be in Western Kentucky. So it makes no sense to do that.
Well, the Big Ten announced it first because the Big Ten likes to think they're the biggest thing in the world, and they're not anymore.
They're not anymore, yeah.
In any sport, they're not the main conference. They're still one of the top 5 conferences, they're still really good. But when's the last time we had a national champion out of the Big Ten in basketball, Steve?
Was it Indiana, 1987?
Oh, well, Michigan State.
Michigan State. No, Michigan State probably in 2001 or 2, yeah.
Well, they won it again, I think, in like 08 or 09. Or no, they lost. They lost to North Carolina.
All right, so take Michigan State out. When's the last time?
Yeah. Well, it's been a while. Michigan lost it a game.
But even Sankey, who's the commissioner of the SEC, he's saying this is not very viable, what we're trying to do. I mean, he's coming out and saying, it's what I think the way the NCAA is going to go with it, but he's saying it doesn't look very viable for the SEC.
Well, how about this? Maybe they ought to just play the games and offer each player $50,000 for the year to play. If they don't want to play, they don't lose a year of eligibility.
I'm all for that.
Because I'll tell you what, if it's me and I'm 20 years old, I'm taking the $50,000 and I'm
taking my chances.
And it'd be nice to see, some college athletes be paid at some point.
Yeah, no, I'd be all for that, and I think that's a good idea, but that's not going to happen either. Because the NCAA, the Power 5 teams are already going to be losing money, television money and whatnot anyway, advertising dollars because games aren't being held. I just think it's not viable to expect that you're going to get through an entire season without some conference or some program just disintegrating itself with this virus.
Well, hell, you might get to week 6 or 7. And Trevor Lawrence gets to COVID, and then Clemson loses 2 games, and you just change the entire outcome of the season.
Yeah, well, another thing I thought about, too, when we were preparing for this was, what does this do to teams like, say, in Indiana, who counts on those non-conference games to get us 6 wins to get into a minor bowl game? Does that
the teams that make minor bowl games, Steve? They play 3 games out of conference they can win. They hope they win 2 or 3 games in conference, and then they make a bowl game.
But like the Pinstripe Bowl, the Motor City Bowl, the Music City Bowl, those bowl games are going to evaporate and dry out because those teams now that don't have those non-conference games, they're not going to get the 6 wins. I mean, Indiana, if it had to play just a Big Ten schedule, would not end up with a winning record. I don't care who anybody thinks.
Well, they might have last year. They were pretty good last year. They might have been able to pull it off then.
There are a lot of fringe teams like Purdue and like Indiana. In every conference, there are fringe teams.
Yeah.
That without the support of those non-conference games, they can't get the 6 wins. You probably knock out 10 to 15 bowl games almost immediately. There's not enough teams out unless you want to change.
That wouldn't be a bad thing, Steve.
No, probably not. I agree. Yeah, I agree because a lot of those bowl games are silly anyway. But you knock them out. People put their heart and soul into building these bowl games. They do a lot of work, and just the ability to do postseason sports in college is a lifetime memory. You know that, I know that, and you keep it for whatever it's worth. So. I think there's just so much ramifications to try and play right now. We're done. And I think we've talked this out.
Yep, we're done. Because my wife just said that we're done. But she misses me. It's been like 30 minutes.
Has it been 30 minutes?
It's been 30 minutes. And, after 30 minutes, then she goes into withdrawal symptoms and she doesn't get to see me.
Wow. My wife took my credit card and ran to Rodeo Drive.
And that was 2 weeks ago.
Thank God it's closed. Thank God it's closed. You can't get on it.
All right, Steve. Go back to watching your golf and your NASCAR.
No, watch NASCAR.
Left.
All right.
All right, guys. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on Facebook Live. Me and Steve, Every Surviving Advance, will be once or twice a week. Me and Sam will be back at 1 tomorrow with the NFL show. You can hear that on Facebook Live. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. You name it, we're there. For now, for Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.